Good morning, friends, and welcome to another sutta study session here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So hello to some friends checking in this morning. So hello, Elaine, Michael, Robin, Geeta, Kow's our friend, and Liz. Good to see all of you again. So as usual, we'll go through a sutta. And I'll give some explanation around it, and you can ask questions at any time, and I'll go through the questions at the end. This is a fairly short sutta, a bit shorter than most of the ones that we've been doing during these morning sessions. So this may go pretty quickly. So if you do have questions, please enter them early and often to make sure that we get to them before the end of the session. So I'll go ahead and read through this sutta. So since it's so short, I might save explanation for the end. And just to give a little background here, so we have two characters in this sutta, and neither one is the Buddha. Rather, we have Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable Mahakotthita. So Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable Mahakotthita are two of the major disciples of the Buddha. So the Buddha, of course, had many prominent disciples in his lifetime. But there's a handful which stand out above the rest. So at the absolute top of the list is, in fact, Venerable Sāriputta, who is called foremost in wisdom, the one who had the clearest understanding of reality. So the Buddha said that in wisdom, Venerable Sāriputta was the one who most closely matched the Buddha. Which is an interesting statement because every arhat has the wisdom of awakening, the wisdom of liberation, the wisdom of eliminating one's defilements, one's mental corruptions, the wisdom of abandoning the conceit of self-existence. They all have that equal wisdom in that category. But the fact that the Buddha singled out Sāriputta as having a higher degree of wisdom than his other disciples indicates that there is some variation in the wisdom of arhats. So not all arhats have an equal level of wisdom in all categories. And this is not gone into in particular detail that I'm aware of in the Theravada canon. As to just what it is that sets Sāriputta's wisdom above that of the other arhats. In the Mahayana Sutras, it's gone into quite a bit more detail about the different gradations of wisdom amongst enlightened beings. So all of them have the same wisdom of the wisdom which knows how to eliminate one's defilements and abandon self-attachment and the sense of self-existence. That's equal across all of them. But in terms of a refined, subtle, precise understanding of the nature of phenomena, apparently there is some difference in distinction between arhats. And there's also a few places in the suttas where it's stated that Samma Sambuddhas have a higher degree of wisdom than arhats. Again, in terms of a thorough, precise, subtle, and comprehensive understanding of the nature of all phenomena. Samma Sambuddhas are unparalleled, unmatched by any being except for other Samma Sambuddhas. So for Shakyamuni Buddha to say that Venerable Sāriputta was almost his equal in wisdom is a remarkable statement. And of course, the vast majority of suttas that we have are delivered by Shakyamuni Buddha. The second largest quantity of suttas are suttas delivered by Venerable Sāriputta. And often in the suttas, we find the Buddha inviting Venerable Sāriputta to give a Dhamma talk, or saying that if the monks want an explanation, then they should get it from Venerable Sāriputta. So the Buddha clearly held Venerable Sāriputta's wisdom and teaching ability in very high esteem. Venerable Mahakotthita, on the other hand, although he appears quite a bit less often in the suttas, he's still one of the chief disciples of the Buddha. And I'm just checking right now, but if I recall correctly, he was the foremost in analytical explanation. Let me just check to make sure this is correct. Yeah, analytical knowledge. So again, similar to Sariputta, in that both of them are related to the function of wisdom. But Venerable Mahakotthita was particularly focused in analyzing, breaking things apart, understanding the fine, subtle details of things. So he was the foremost in Patisambhida, which literally means breaking things apart. So this sutta then is a conversation between these two people about a particular refined aspect of analytical wisdom. So I'll go ahead and read through the discourse. Then Venerable Mahakotthita approached Venerable Sāriputta and conversed with him. When the usual polite conversation was finished, Venerable Mahakotthita sat to one side. So first off, I really love it when a sutta starts off with two people coming together and engaging in polite conversation. Because there's, and even the Buddha in many suttas is recorded in this way. Always starting off with the usual polite conversation, the usual like, hello, how are you? How's it going? And in fact, in the Vinaya, in many places when monks go to see the Buddha, also a few places in the suttas, the first thing the Buddha says to them is like, oh, how are you doing? Are you getting enough to eat? Are you getting by? So I also find this really adorable in that instead of launching directly into like, you must destroy your defilements, instead it's like, oh, how are you doing? Are you getting enough food these days? So there's this really like sweet, warm-hearted, relaxed, genteel manner, which comes across for me when I see suttas beginning in this way. So it's starting with the usual polite mannerisms that we use to smooth over the beginning of a conversation. So Venerable Mahakotthita sat to one side and said to Venerable Sāriputta, Venerable, when, through dispassion, the 6 sense domains completely cease, does something else exist? So the 6 sense domains, that's sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. So the domain of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and cognizing. So the 6 sense domains. And technically speaking, it's all mind domain. So technically there's only one sense domain, which is the domain of the mind. But we subdivide it into 6 for the sake of clarity and for the sake of ease of analysis. So this is one feature which runs throughout the Buddha's teachings, which is one of dividing reality into small, manageable pieces so that it's easier to analyze each of those pieces one at a time. So, for example, we can see that vision is impermanent. We can see that vision is impersonal. It's like, okay, check that one off the list. We can see that hearing is impermanent and impersonal. Okay, check that one off the list. And you go down the list and eventually there's nothing left. And you're like, oh, I guess everything is impermanent and impersonal. There's nothing left on the list. There's nothing left to go through. So the six senses, then, it's one way of dividing up reality. So we divide up reality into these six forms of sensation, these six varieties of sensory experience. And the question Venerable Mahakotita is asking, he says, when through dispassion, the six sense domains completely cease. So through dispassion, in Pali, this is viraga. Viraga literally means without passion, without lust. So the mind has no passion and lust for any sensory experience. The mind is not leaning into any sensory experience. It's not pursuing any kind of sensory experience. And again, when we say sensory experience, that includes thoughts. So there's one person I know who actually from the outside lives a fairly restrained, simple life. Not quite to the degree of a monastic, but much simpler and more restrained than the average lay person. And I was talking to her one day about her meditation practice, and she revealed that during meditation, she actually just spaces out and daydreams and comes up with stories and imagines different characters and events and until the bell rings. And then that's her meditation. And this is an example of lust and passion for sensory experiences. Specifically, lust and passion for mental objects, for mental activities, for mental phenomena, mental constructs. So obsession with mental constructs is not necessarily a superior form of sensory pleasure than lust for physical sensations. It's all the same. It's all lust for sensory experience. It's all desire and attachment in the sense domains of one sort or another. So recognizing that we're also trying to cultivate dispassion towards mental phenomena as well. We're trying to cultivate dispassion towards all phenomena without exception. And one of the things that happens is that when we cultivate dispassion towards the six sense domains, we cease participating in them, we cease creating them, we cease reifying them, we drop our sense of self-identity around them, then they start to fade away and dissipate. So this becomes really clear during meditation practice. Either when one is deep in the recognition of impermanence, or when one's practice of silent illumination is very well developed. You can come to a point where the sense domains start to disappear. And don't try to force this to happen, because if you try to force it to happen, you're not going to achieve anything useful. But if you just allow it to happen, then you can come to a point where the sense domains start to vanish. Yet the mind remains completely awake and alert. So this is starting to get a taste of what Venerable Mahakotita is asking about. So he's actually asking about a fairly advanced experience. This is not something that's going to happen in your first 5 years, or possibly your first 10 years. Or possibly longer, depending upon the strength of your practice and the strength of your past karma. But it is something that one can come to. One can come to a point where one starts to see sensory experiences fading, diminishing, vanishing. Initially for just brief flashes, and then it can extend for longer and longer periods of time. And it's possible, it's mentioned a number of places in the suttas, that it's possible to enter a state of mind in which sensation and feeling cease entirely. And there's two forms of this. So one is called Sanya Vedyata Nirodha, so the cessation of perception and feeling, which is a form of samadhi, which is attainable by those who have eliminated sensual desire. But this is considered an incomplete cessation because there's still the persistent carrier wave of self-identity going in the background. And eventually one emerges from that state of samadhi and realizes that one is still not fully enlightened. There's still work to be done. And the other form of the complete cessation of the six sense domains is the immersion in the nibbana dhatu. So the complete immersion in the unconditioned, the element of the unconditioned. So partial immersion can happen before full enlightenment while one is still alive. Complete immersion in the unconditioned element happens at the time of passing away of a fully awakened being. So Venerable Mahakotita, it's not clear what he's talking about here, whether he's talking about the partial limited cessation of the six sense domains that can happen even to ordinary unenlightened beings who are practicing insight meditation. Or if he's talking about the cessation of perception and feeling, so this advanced samadhi state accessible only to non-returners and arhants. Or if he's talking about the utterly complete cessation of the six sense domains that happens at the time of the passing away of an arhat or a sammasambuddha. My interpretation would be he's actually talking about all three of these. He's not picking out one of the three, but rather he's referring to all three together as different variations or gradations of the same basic phenomena, which is the cessation of the six sense domains when the mind is influenced by dispassion. So he's asking Sāriputta, when the six sense domains completely cease, does something else exist? In other words, is there something other than the six senses? If the six senses are gone, is there something else? And Sāriputta replies, do not think that, Venerable. Interestingly enough, he doesn't say no. What he says is, don't think that. So then Venerable Mahakotita says, well, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, does something else not exist? In other words, is there nothing else? So there's nothing else that exists. And Sāriputta answers, do not think that, Venerable. It also is an interesting statement. It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought there wasn't anything other than the six sense domains. So wouldn't that mean that when the six sense domains cease, that there's nothing else that exists? There can be no something else which doesn't exist? But Sāriputta also says this isn't quite the right way to think. So then naturally, Venerable Mahakotita brings in the other two possibilities of the tetralemma. He says, Venerable, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, does something else both exist and not exist? So just to make sure we've got our bases covered. He's like, well, okay, how about something which is simultaneously existent and non-existent? How about that? And Sāriputta says, do not think that, Venerable. And then finally, Venerable Mahakotita asks the fourth category. He says, Venerable, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, does something else neither exist nor not exist? And Venerable Sāriputta responds, do not think that, Venerable. So at this point, one might be left a little bit puzzled. So aside from the six sense domains, is there something else? Is there nothing else? Both or neither? And all four of these Venerable Sāriputta rejects as being invalid ways of thinking, invalid viewpoints. So first off, I should point out that the third and fourth categories, which are not included in Western philosophy, but which are a standard feature in Buddhist philosophy, So the third one, both existing and not existing, is considered a subtle affirmation of existence. And neither existing nor not existing is a subtle denial of existence. So these are more refined examples of the wrong views of existence and non-existence. And they're also still putting the world in terms of existence and non-existence. So in the suttas, the Buddha says quite clearly in a few places that the concepts of existence and non-existence do not apply. They're not relevant. They only make sense from a limited, distorted lens. But when one has a clear picture of reality, then the concepts of existence and non-existence don't apply. We see that those concepts are irrelevant. They have no reality to them. Venerable Mahakotita, though, he is trying to get Sāriputta to give a bit more information. So he says, when asked, and he goes through each of the questions he asked. He says, so when asked, does something else exist? You said, do not think that. When asked, does something else not exist? You said, do not think that. When asked, does something else both exist and not exist? You said, do not think that. When asked, does something else neither exist nor not exist? You said, do not think that. And then Venerable Mahakotita asks, Venerable, how is the meaning of this statement to be seen? In other words, what are you trying to say? How are we supposed to understand this? It's like, haven't we covered all our bases? All four possible ways of viewing things in terms of existing or not existing? What else? What other way could there be to look at this? So then Venerable Sāriputta answers. He says, when one says, Venerable, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, something else exists, then one complicates the uncomplicated. I find this delicious. And he gives the same answer for each of these four. So whether you say something else exists or does not exist or both or neither, then one complicates the uncomplicated. So in Pali, that is apapanchang papancheti. Those who are familiar with Buddhist technical terms might recognize the word papancha, which is commonly translated as proliferation or complication. So the tendency to complicate things, to create mental, how do you say this? This complex, detailed knots that we build in our mind. We build these detailed, complicated stories and perspectives and viewpoints in our mind. And there's another very famous sutta which targets papancha very specifically. It's called the Madhupindika Sutta, the honey ball or the lump of honey, which is a sutta I spoke about a few months ago. In this, again, it's very specifically targeting the nature of papancha, the way we get lost in mental complication and proliferation, and also pointing out how to abandon that process of unnecessary complication. So here, when Venerable Sāriputta is saying this, he's saying, if you have a viewpoint about things existing or not existing after the six sense domains cease, then you're just complicating the uncomplicated. It's like, it's not complicated. The six sense domains have ceased. That's not complicated. But when you start talking about other things existing or not existing, then you're adding a complication to something that's not complicated. And then Sāriputta says, Venerable, the six sense domains go as far as complication goes, and complication goes as far as the six sense domains go. Venerable, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, complication ceases and is pacified. This also is a very interesting statement. So the Buddha is saying that papancha, so complication or proliferation, is inseparably connected to the six senses. So there can be no papancha when the six sense domains are not in operation. So papancha then is a function of the six senses. Or you might say that the six senses are a manifestation of papancha. This would actually be a more accurate statement. To say that the six senses are a manifestation of papancha. This is actually what we see in dependent origination. So in dependent origination, the Buddha says, avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vijnana, vijnana paccaya namarupam, namarupa paccaya salayatanam. So from ignorance arises sankharas, sankharas being the discrimination of separate phenomena, which is another way of talking about papancha, complication. So from ignorance, we complicate things. And that complication is the basis for consciousness. Consciousness is another way of talking about the six senses. What is it that we're conscious of? We're conscious of mind and body, namarupa. And mind and body has the six senses. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So this is another way of talking about how from papancha, from complication, mental proliferation, this unnecessary complexifying of reality, there arises the experience of the six senses. And then within the domain of the six senses, we complicate that experience. We add concepts and ideas on top of those experiences. And one of the forms of concept and idea that we add is the concept of existence and non-existence. We have an experience of seeing, and we think that there is an object that's being seen. Well, that's just proliferation. That's just complication. That's just adding a concept where there is none. It's creating the idea of a permanent existent object when there is no such thing to be found. So Venerable Sāriputta here, he says, when through dispassion the six sense domains completely cease, complication ceases and is pacified. In other words, when one enters into any of the three levels of sensory cessation that I spoke about earlier, so either the limited form that comes through developing the perception of impermanence or silent illumination practice, or the more advanced form, so the immersion in the cessation of perception and feeling that a non-returner or an arhat can attain, or the complete immersion in the unconditioned, which comes at the parinibbana of a fully awakened being, passing away of a fully awakened being. In any one of these three stages, one can see that the whole complication process comes to a halt. So when the six sense domains cease, there's nothing to complicate. There's nothing to proliferate about. There's nothing to make a mess out of. That'd be another way to translate the word papancheti, making a mess out of things. So we're taking something clean and simple and we're making it messy. That's what papancheti means. It means making a mess out of things. So we don't need to make things messy. Reality is phenomenally simple, extraordinarily simple. But we come along and complicate it with all of our ideas and viewpoints and attachments and opinions and self-identities. We complicate the uncomplicated. And so the Buddha is talking about something very simple. He's saying, well, if you just stop making a mess out of things, then you'll see the innate natural purity of uncomplicated reality, the innate natural purity of the unconditioned element, which pervades all things, and supersedes all things. So this is similar to the concept that we find in Zen practice. So in Chan Buddhism, this idea that there's no need to attain enlightenment per se. You just need to stop generating delusion. And you'll realize that enlightenment was already there. So this is pointing to the same concept. So in Zen, when they say you are already a Buddha, what they mean by that is that the unconditioned element is already completely pervasive throughout our experience. We don't need to generate it or produce it. Instead, what we need to do is to stop generating noise, stop producing messiness. And that underlying universal, all-pervasive simplicity of the unconditioned element starts to come into view. So, those are my thoughts on this sutta. I have to say I really adore this sutta, which is why I was quite looking forward to speaking about it, as it touches on a number of topics which I personally find extremely relevant to my own practice, my own approach to being the Dhamma. So I hope that this sutta has also been of interest and benefit to your practice as well. So at this time, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in. I see that there's a few questions already. So first off, hello to a few more friends checking in. Hello, Sarah, Galaxy, Brian, Denise, Stacy, and Poonam. Happy to see all of you once again. So Gita asks, once one has no attachment to the sense domains and mental phenomena, then does one awaken to Nibbana? Yes, exactly so. Yep. She further asks, is this achieved by mindfulness with clear comprehension in the present moment and practice of nibbida? Yeah, also correct. Yep. I would emphasize, though, that that's supported by samadhi. So without samadhi, it's very difficult. Actually, without samadhi, it's impossible to have the precision of mindfulness and comprehension necessary in order to perfect nibbida. So nibbida is commonly translated as disenchantment, which is a decent enough translation. That's my usual go-to translation for the word nibbida. But nibbida, it comes from the verb vindati, which means to seek, to look for, trying to find something. So nibbindati means to stop seeking, which also is related to what is being said in this sutta and in other suttas about papancha. So to stop making a mess out of things. Stop going out looking for something somewhere else when the unconditioned element is already present right here in this place and time. You don't need to go seeking it. Stop seeking for happiness somewhere else. It's already here. Stop seeking for awakening in some other time and place. It's already here. We just need to see it, to recognize it, to realize it. So Michael is asking, is Sariputta telling us here that we simply need to give up our views? Well, first off, that's not a simply. Giving up our views is remarkably challenging. But I would just like to say a little bit about the topic of giving up views. So we are to give up wrong view, and we are to cultivate right view. This is an important distinction. Some people, when they hear about abandoning views, they make the mistake of thinking that means giving up all views. But this is not in line with the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha's teachings is to abandon wrong view and to cultivate right view. So right view is a correct understanding of the nature of reality. That's not something to abandon. That's something to cherish. That's something to prize and to cultivate. And Michael further asks, in a state of samadhi, questioning like this cannot exist? It depends on the kind of samadhi, actually. So I might talk about this more this evening or tomorrow evening, maybe tomorrow evening. There's different forms of samadhi. But usually when we talk about samadhi, we're talking about a state of mental stillness and clarity. And in that stillness and clarity, then a clear vision of reality forms on its own. Or again, more precisely, the clouds and mist start to dissipate from the mind. That would be a more accurate way of stating things. And Michael also says, I think the various translators use different English words more than in other sutras. I'm not sure what word you're talking about. It's always true that different translators use different English words, and that's because for many Pali words, there's no exact English equivalent. So every translator is doing their best to communicate the underlying meaning of the sutta. And language is messy and complicated. So we do the best we can. And also different translators will often emphasize different shades or connotations. So sometimes in translating a word, rather than pick what might be objectively the best translation of a word, sometimes a translator will choose a translation which is intentionally different from the standard translation, in order to highlight the shades of meaning which are not commonly known, not commonly aware of. And some translators will also constantly change how they translate words. So Bhikkhu Bodhi, for example, if you look at the different translations he's released, he's actually constantly changing the way he translates a number of common technical terms. And that's because any one of those translations is insufficient. And it's only through having awareness of the many different ways of translating a word that one starts to get a really clear understanding of what the word actually means and how it applies in different circumstances and places. So if you really want to get a deep understanding of the suttas, there's no substitute for learning Pali. At a bare minimum, one should get a deep understanding of all common technical terms, at a minimum. But optimally, one should just learn the whole language. It's not that complicated. I say it's not that complicated, but I know other people find it difficult and challenging. But it's doable. It's doable. Anyway, that's the end of the questions. You have a question. Yeah.
I do. Bhante, will you speak about the differences between dispassion and equanimity? And maybe even
Okay. So Jens is asking about the distinction between dispassion and equanimity. So dispassion is viraga, which means the absence of lust, the absence of passion. Equanimity is upekkha in Pali. So upekkha literally means looking closely. But its applied meaning in the suttas is a state of mind where one is not leaning into either desire or aversion. So there is a fair amount of overlap between the concepts of dispassion and equanimity, in that when one is dispassionate, then one is naturally also equanimous. And when one is equanimous, there's also a certain amount of dispassion present in the mind. In the suttas, though, the word viraga usually indicates a deep transformation of mind, which is irreversible. So an irreversible elimination of lust and passion. Whereas equanimity is a temporary state of mind, which can be reached purely through samadhi. So viraga is the product of wisdom, whereas equanimity can arise simply through concentration or through non-attention. So there's a very clear distinction there. So you might say that viraga is equanimity plus wisdom. That might be a way you could talk about it. Okay. And I don't see any other questions. So I think we can go ahead and end it this time. So thank you all for joining in, and please continue joining in. So 7:30 this evening, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then 7:30 again tomorrow evening. So we'll end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, see you next time.